The little girl stood in front of the glass display, her tiny hands pressed against the cool surface as she gazed at the assortment of brightly wrapped boxes. Her big eyes shone with a mixture of excitement and determination, her heart pounding in her chest. This was the moment she had been dreaming of. This was going to be the perfect gift for her mom. The store was quiet, the soft hum of the air conditioning mixing with the distant chatter of the other shoppers. The scent of fresh flowers from the shop's corner filled the air, and everything about this place felt like magic. It was a small store tucked away in the corner of the strip mall, but to little Zoe, it felt like a palace. A palace where dreams could come true. And today she was going to make one of those dreams come true. Zoe, barely 7 years old, was small for her age, her cherubic face framed by tight curls that bounced as she shifted from foot to foot. She had no money of her own, no allowance, but she had a mission that had begun a few weeks ago when she heard her mom crying late one night. Her mom never cried, not in front of her at least. She tried to hide it, but Zoe had overheard her talking on the phone, her voice shaky and broken. It had something to do with bills, with the rent not being paid, and with a sense of uncertainty that Zoe didn't quite understand. But what Zoe understood was that her mom had always made sure they had everything they needed, even when things were hard. She had worked long hours at the diner, had put up with rude customers, and had still managed to smile every time Zoe came home from school. Her mom had always told her, "You don't have to be rich in love," and Zoe believed that with all her heart. Now she wanted to show her mom how much she loved her too. She wanted to give her something special, something that would make her mom smile. Zoe had saved up all the change she could find, hidden in the couch cushions, dropped in the parking lot, spare pennies she could gather, and it wasn't much, but it was all hers. Enough to buy a small gift. Zoe had picked the store carefully. It wasn't a fancy store with expensive items or things she couldn't afford. It was a small local shop, and the shelves were filled with affordable, beautiful things. But Zoe had her eye on one particular item, a small, delicate pendant necklace with a tiny heart charm. It was simple, elegant, and it was perfect. Her mom would love it. She could already picture her mom's face lighting up when she saw it. Taking a deep breath, Zoe looked at the price tag. Her heart dropped. It was more than the coin she had saved. It wasn't much more, but it felt like an impossible gap, a chasm she couldn't cross. For a moment she stood there, staring at the necklace, disappointment creeping into her chest. How could she make her mom's day special if she didn't have enough money? She chewed on her lip, trying to think of a way to make up the difference, but nothing came to mind. She had thought about asking the clerk if she could work for the rest, maybe sweeping the floor or doing something for the shop, but she didn't have the courage to ask. What if they said no? She turned away from the display, her small shoulders slumping. But as she made her way to the door, she froze. A woman walked in, her steps light and purposeful, her presence commanding but gentle. She was older, in her 30s or so, with long dark hair pulled into a neat bun. Her outfit was simple, yet she had an air of grace about her, as if she didn't need to try to be noticed. She just was. Zoe watched her as she approached the counter, her eyes following the woman's movements, captivated by something she couldn't explain. The woman smiled at the clerk, exchanging pleasantries before she turned her attention to Zoe, who quickly averted her gaze, embarrassed. But the woman didn't pass by without noticing her. "Hey there," the woman said, her voice warm and friendly. "What's your name?" Zoe's eyes darted up to meet the woman's, a little startled by her attention. "Zoe," she whispered. "That's a beautiful name," the woman said with a smile. "What are you looking at?" Zoe hesitated, then glanced back at the display with the necklace. Her stomach twisted. She didn't want to admit she couldn't afford it, but the words spilled out before she could stop them. "I was just looking at that necklace for my mom. But I don't have enough money." The woman's eyes followed Zoe's gaze and her smile softened. "A gift for your mom, huh?" she asked, kneeling down so that they were eye level. "That's very sweet. I think your mom is going to be really lucky to have a daughter like you." Zoe felt a warmth bloom in her chest at the woman's words. "I just want her to be happy," she whispered, a little shy. The woman's gaze lingered on the necklace for a moment, and then she stood up, turning to the clerk. "How much is it?" she asked. Zoe's heart beat faster, but she didn't dare hope. It was too much even for an adult. But the woman's next words made her pulse race. "Put it on my tab," the woman said, and as she spoke, she winked at Zoe. The clerk, clearly surprised, hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Of course, ma'am." Zoe blinked, stunned. "Wait, you're buying it for me?" The woman nodded, smiling down at her with a kindness that made Zoe's chest feel light. "I am. It's for your mom, right?" Zoe's mouth went dry. She felt a lump form in her throat as she processed what was happening. But I didn't. I know, the woman interrupted gently, placing a hand on Zoe's shoulder. You didn't have to. But sometimes, people need a little help along the way. You're doing something beautiful for your mom, Zoe. And that's worth helping. Tears welled up in Zoe's eyes, but she blinked them away quickly, not wanting to cry in front of the woman. Thank you. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, the woman replied, her voice full of warmth. You just keep doing the good things you're doing. Your mom is lucky to have a daughter like you. Zoe couldn't find the words to respond. All she could do was nod, her chest tight with gratitude. The necklace was placed in a small box, and the woman handed it to Zoe, her hand gently brushing the little girl's. Go on, the woman said, smiling. Give it to her. You've earned it. Zoe clutched the box tightly to her chest, feeling as though she were holding something priceless. As she walked out of the store, she felt like the luckiest girl in the world. Not just because of the gift in her hands, but because, for the first time, she realized that the kindness of a stranger could change everything. It wasn't just about the gift, it was about the message the woman had sent. That kindness, even in small acts, could make a world of difference. As Zoe stepped out into the cool afternoon air, she felt a wave of excitement and anticipation rise inside her. Her mom would be so surprised, so happy. She couldn't wait to see her face when she opened it. But more than that, she realized how much of a difference it made to help someone else. The stranger had shown her that kindness was the most precious gift of all. And as Zoe made her way home, her heart full, she realized that sometimes, the world needed more than just a gift. It needed people who cared enough to give it, without question, without hesitation. She couldn't wait to give it to her mom. The journey back home felt like a dream to Zoe, her small hands clutching the gift tightly against her chest. She had never felt such a mix of emotions in one day, excitement, gratitude, a little fear, but the overwhelming feeling was that of love. She couldn't wait to see the smile on her mother's face when she handed over the small, carefully chosen necklace. It was all she had to give, but she was sure it would mean the world to her mom. Zoe had always known that her mom was a special person. She worked long hours at the local diner, often coming home late, tired and worn out, but never failing to greet her daughter with a smile. They didn't have much. Just a small apartment with creaky floorboards and old furniture, but Zoe never felt like they were missing anything. Her mother made sure that they were always happy no matter what. Her love filled every corner of their home, and for Zoe that was enough. But recently she had noticed the change in her mother's demeanor. The long hours had started to wear on her more, and Zoe had overheard a conversation one night where her mom had said something about not making ends meet, and "We'll be okay, Zoe." But it was hard to ignore the worry in her mom's voice. Zoe didn't understand all of it, but she knew one thing for sure. She wanted to make things easier for her. She wanted her mom to know how much she appreciated everything she did for her. She had saved up every penny she could find, all the loose change from around the house and in the car, and even a few bills from her piggy bank. She hadn't been sure it would be enough, but when she had seen the necklace in the shop, her heart had jumped. She didn't care that it wasn't something extravagant or fancy. It was a gift from the heart, something she knew her mom would treasure. It was everything Zoe could offer. As she walked down the sidewalk toward her home, the sound of her sneakers slapping against the wet pavement felt like a steady rhythm in her chest. It was a cool evening, the air thick with the scent of rain, but Zoe hardly noticed the chill as the warmth from the shop and the excitement in her heart carried her along. She imagined her mom's face lighting up when she opened the small box. The image of that smile made her smile too. She reached the apartment building, her small body practically glowing with anticipation. She hurried up the stairs, the building's familiar creaks and groans barely registering in her mind. She just had to get inside, get the gift in her mom's hands. The thought made her pulse race. But when she opened the door, the quiet in the apartment caught her off guard. "Mom?" Zoe called softly, peering into the living room, but there was no answer. The room was dimly lit, with only the faint glow of the kitchen light casting shadows across the walls. Her mother's coat was missing from the hook, and Zoe felt a small twinge of unease. She set the small box on the counter and called again, a little louder this time. "Mom?" Still no response. Zoe's heart skipped a beat as she walked further into the apartment, her bare feet padding against the cold floor. She checked her mother's bedroom, the bathroom, even the kitchen, but her mom wasn't home. She frowned, biting her lip. Her mom usually came home right after work, but it was already late, almost 8 p.m., and her mother hadn't returned yet. Zoe was about to sit down when she noticed the phone on the kitchen counter. It was buzzing with a new message notification, and instinctively, Zoe picked it up. She knew she shouldn't, but her curiosity got the better of her. It was from a number she didn't recognize, but the message seemed urgent. Zoe, your mom called earlier. She's been in an accident on the way home. She's at the ER right now. Please come immediately. Zoe's world stopped. Her heart dropped into her stomach as she read the message again, then again. It couldn't be real. It couldn't be happening. The words blurred in her vision as her breath hitched in her chest. Her mom was in the hospital? After everything she had worked so hard for? After all the days spent making sure Zoe never felt the weight of their struggles? Zoe's mind raced as panic began to take hold of her. She didn't know what to do. She needed to get to the hospital. She needed to make sure her mom was okay. She needed her mom. Tears started to sting her eyes, but she wiped them away quickly. She couldn't break down. Not now. She had to be strong for her mom. She had to get there. Still, a part of her was frozen in place, the confusion and fear overwhelming. But the thought of her mom being in pain, of her mom needing her, broke through the haze of fear. She had to go. She had to get to her. Zoe grabbed her jacket and the small gift box, holding it tightly in her hands as she rushed out of the apartment and into the cold night air. Her legs felt heavy as she ran down the stairs, her heart thudding in her chest with every step. The gift she had bought, the one she had been so excited to give, now felt like it didn't matter. Her mom needed her. That's all that mattered. The hospital wasn't far. She had been there a few times, mostly for checkups or when a classmate had broken an arm. But tonight it was different. Tonight, the familiar white walls of the hospital were looming, intimidating as she walked through the automatic doors and up to the reception. "Excuse me," Zoe said, her voice trembling. "I'm looking for my mom. Her name is Diana Williams. She was in an accident." The receptionist, a woman in her late 40s with glasses perched on her nose, glanced at Zoe with an expression that was both kind and concerned. She typed something into her computer and then looked back at Zoe. "Ms. Williams is in the ER. She was brought in a little while ago. If you'll follow me." Zoe's heart pounded in her chest as the receptionist led her down a long, sterile hallway. Her legs felt like they were made of jelly, but she kept moving forward. She had to see her mom. She had to make sure she was okay. The doors to the ER slid open, and Zoe's eyes immediately locked onto her mother, lying in a bed with an IV in her arm. Her mom's face was pale, her eyes closed, and there was a soft beeping sound from the machines nearby. Zoe's throat tightened and she swallowed hard, her chest aching. She stood frozen for a moment, taking in the sight of her mother, fragile and vulnerable in the hospital bed. The woman who had always been so strong, so steady, was now lying there, unconscious and hurt. Zoe set the small box on the table next to her mom's bed, her fingers trembling as she did. She had bought the necklace to see her mom smile, to show her how much she loved her. But now, all Zoe wanted was for her mom to open her eyes, to be okay. That was the only gift that mattered now. Tears welled up in her eyes again, and she took her mom's hand gently, pressing it to her cheek. "I'm here, Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm here." And in that moment, as the quiet beeping of the machines filled the space around her, Zoe understood. She didn't need to buy her mom a gift. She didn't need to give her anything other than her love, her presence. That was all her mom ever needed and all Zoe needed too. The sterile smell of the hospital floor lingered in the air, heavy and cold, as Zoe stood by her mother's bedside. The rainstorm from earlier had turned into a steady drizzle, and outside, the soft hum of the city seemed so distant compared to the bustle inside the ER. Zoe couldn't stop staring at her mom, lying there so still, her breathing shallow but steady, the beep of the heart monitor a constant, reassuring reminder that she was still there. Still alive. She wasn't sure how long she'd been standing there, holding her mom's hand, the small gift box on the table next to them. The room felt so large, so foreign, with the constant movement of nurses and doctors walking by, their faces briefly illuminated by the fluorescent lights. Zoe wanted to ask when her mom would wake up, but she didn't dare interrupt the silence that hung in the air. Her mind was racing. What had happened? How had this all happened so suddenly? One minute, she had been picking out a necklace for her mom, the next she was here in a hospital room, staring at her unconscious mother. A part of her still couldn't believe it was real. "Are you okay, honey?" A voice broke through her thoughts, soft but firm. Zoe looked up to find a woman standing at the door of the room. She wasn't a nurse, not in scrubs, but her warm smile and gentle demeanor made her look like someone who belonged in this place, someone who understood the weight of fear and grief. She was tall, with long hair tied back in a neat bun, and her face had the kind of compassion Zoe hadn't seen in a while. Her eyes were kind, full of concern, and when she looked at Zoe, it felt as though the room had shrunk, the distant noise fading to a comforting hum. Zoe felt a wave of relief wash over her, and she nodded slowly, unsure of what to say. The woman stepped into the room, her footsteps light, as though she didn't want to disturb the delicate silence. She pulled up a chair next to Zoe, sitting down with a quiet grace. "I'm sorry," the woman said, her voice low and soothing. "It's hard, isn't it? When someone you love is hurt." Zoe could feel her throat tighten, the words sticking like stones. She didn't want to break down, not here, not in front of a stranger, but everything she'd been holding back since she found out her mom was in the hospital suddenly threatened to spill over. I don't know what happened," Zoe said, her voice trembling as she spoke. "She was just supposed to be coming home. I don't know why it happened. I just wanted to make her smile. I wanted to give her something nice." The woman's eyes softened, and she placed a hand gently on Zoe's, offering a small but comforting smile. "You've already done something wonderful. You're here for her. That's all that matters. Your mom knows that you love her." Zoe wiped her eyes, trying to hold back the tears that were threatening to spill. She didn't want to cry in front of this woman. But her words, so simple yet so powerful, struck a chord. Of course her mom knew she loved her. That wasn't the issue. But now, all she could think about was how much her mom had done for her, how much she had sacrificed just to keep their little family afloat. And now Zoe felt helpless. She wanted to do something, anything, to make everything right again. I don't know what to do," Zoe whispered, her voice cracking. "I wanted to make her happy. I just wanted to give her something she could love." The woman nodded, understanding. Sometimes just being there, just showing that you care, is the best thing you can do for someone. Your mom will wake up. She'll be okay. And when she does, you'll be there, and that will mean more to her than any gift could. Zoe looked at the small gift box again, still resting on the table. The necklace, the one she had chosen with so much care, felt like it was from a lifetime ago, like it didn't even matter anymore. "Can I tell you something?" the woman asked softly, pulling Zoe's attention back to her. Zoe nodded, and the woman smiled gently. "I think it's important to remember that you don't have to buy love. Love is something that already exists between you and your mom. You've already shown that by being here. That's the real gift." Zoe felt her heart flutter as the woman's words sank in. She had been so focused on the necklace, on the material object, that she had forgotten the one thing that truly mattered, the love between them. It wasn't about what she gave her mom, it was about the fact that she cared enough to want to show her mom how much she meant to her. Her mom knew she loved her. The necklace wasn't the thing that would make her smile. It was the fact that Zoe was there, holding her hand, being present, offering all of her love in that quiet, selfless way. The woman sat with Zoe for a while longer, talking to her softly, offering words of comfort, letting her know it was okay to feel scared, to feel overwhelmed. But most importantly, she showed Zoe that the love she had for her mom didn't need to be wrapped in a box or given in a material way, it was already there, flowing between them. After what felt like hours, the woman stood up, smoothing her clothes as she looked back at Zoe. "I need to step out for a moment, but I'll be back to check on you. You're not alone in this, okay?" Zoe looked up at her, her eyes still brimming with unshed tears, but a small, hopeful smile tugged at the corners of her lips. "Thank you," Zoe whispered, her voice stronger now. "Thank you for being here." The woman nodded, her smile warm and reassuring. "You're stronger than you think, Zoe. You'll get through this. And your mom will wake up. I know she will." As the woman stepped out of the room, Zoe sat there in the quiet, her mom's hand still resting in hers. The gift box, once the center of her world, now seemed small and insignificant compared to the weight of her love and her presence. She no longer needed to prove her love with a necklace. She had already given her mom everything she needed. And as the minutes stretched on, Zoe leaned in, pressing her cheek against her mother's hand. "I love you, Mom," she whispered, her voice soft but steady. "I'm here. And I'll be here when you wake up. I promise." And for the first time that night, Zoe felt a sense of peace. She didn't need to fix everything. She just needed to be there, and that was enough. The night stretched on, but Zoe no longer felt the sharp, gnawing fear that had once consumed her. She sat quietly by her mother's bedside, her small hands still resting gently in her mom's, the soft rhythmic beeping of the machines providing a steady pulse in the otherwise quiet room. The woman, whoever she was, had offered Zoe something she hadn't realized she needed. Reassurance, a reminder of the strength in simply being there for someone you love. Zoe had arrived at the hospital in a panic, certain she was going to lose the one person who meant everything to her, but now, there was a quiet steadiness within her. The uncertainty was still there, of course, but it was paired with a growing hope that her mother would wake up and be okay. That hope anchored her, giving her the strength to remain calm, to stay with her mother and offer her love in the most meaningful way possible, just by being there. The hours passed, and Zoe felt like time had lost all meaning. Every minute felt both endless and fleeting. The occasional sound of footsteps from the hallway or the shuffle of nurses entering and exiting the room brought Zoe back to the present, but mostly she remained focused on her mother, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest. Every now and then her mother's fingers would twitch, and Zoe would lean in closer, her heart lifting with the hope that her mom might wake up soon. Just as the exhaustion began to settle in her bones, Zoe heard the soft click of the door. She turned to see the nurse who had been checking on her mom earlier, but this time she wasn't alone. Standing just outside the doorway was the same woman who had spoken to her earlier. The woman with the warm eyes and the soothing presence that had helped calm Zoe's frantic thoughts. Her smile was just as gentle now, and Zoe felt an unexpected comfort wash over her when she saw her. "Is everything okay?" Zoe asked, her voice hoarse from the tension of the past few hours. The nurse nodded, her face kind but professional. "Your mom is stable for now," she said. "We're monitoring her closely. She's been through a lot, but we're doing everything we can. If you'd like to take a break, I can get you some coffee or a blanket." Zoe glanced at her mom's face again, her expression still relaxed but distant, and then back to the woman. "I'm okay. I don't need to leave. I just want to stay here." The woman, sensing Zoe's hesitance, stepped inside the room and approached her. "That's very strong of you, Zoe," she said, sitting down in the chair the nurse had left behind. "But it's also okay to rest. Your mom is in good hands." Zoe felt the truth of her words, but there was something inside her that just couldn't leave. She didn't want to miss a single moment of her mom's recovery, to be away even for a minute. Yet, as the woman looked at her with understanding, Zoe felt something shift. She didn't need to be afraid anymore. She could stay, but it was okay to let others step in and help too. "I'm just scared," Zoe admitted quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman nodded, her face softening. "Fear is natural, especially when we love someone so much. But sometimes the best thing we can do is trust those who are trained to help. They've been through this before and they'll take care of her." She placed a hand on Zoe's arm, a gentle but reassuring touch. "And you've already done your part. Your mom knows you're here. She knows how much you love her." Zoe swallowed the lump in her throat, blinking back the fresh surge of tears. She had wanted to fix everything for her mom, to make things right. But this wasn't something she could control. She could only be there. She could only love her mom the way she always had. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cry," Zoe said quickly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. The woman smiled, her expression filled with warmth and compassion. "There's no need to apologize. Crying is part of the process. You're not weak for showing your emotions. It shows how deeply you care." Zoe nodded, the comfort of the woman's words sinking in. She didn't feel so alone anymore. It was as if the weight of the world, the weight of everything that had happened tonight, was being lifted just a little bit. For the first time in hours, she let herself lean back in her chair, taking a slow, deep breath. The exhaustion, both physical and emotional, washed over her, but the woman's presence gave her a sense of peace. She glanced at the clock, realizing that time had continued to pass, despite everything. It was almost 2 a.m. now. Her mother had been in the hospital for hours, and Zoe had hardly moved. But now, as she sat in that quiet room, Zoe felt a strange sense of stillness settling inside her. She wasn't just waiting for her mom to wake up anymore. She was embracing the waiting, allowing herself to feel the emotions she had kept so tightly controlled for hours. "I didn't even think I was brave," Zoe said after a long silence, her voice more sure than it had been before. "I didn't think I could handle all of this. But I guess I have been, in my own way. Just by being here." The woman's smile widened, proud. "You're stronger than you think, Zoe. And you don't have to do it all alone. Sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when to ask for help. You don't have to carry the weight of the world by yourself." The words were simple, yet they rang with truth. Zoe had tried so hard to fix everything, to make it all better, but it wasn't all on her. And in that moment, Zoe understood. It wasn't just about the necklace she had bought her mom. It wasn't about the material things or the grand gestures. It was about being there, being present, and offering your love in the most simple and pure ways. The woman stood up after a moment, nodding toward the door. "I'll leave you two alone now," she said softly. "But remember, you're not alone in this." Zoe didn't say anything right away, but as the woman left the room, She felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She hadn't expected to meet someone like her tonight, someone who would offer her comfort when she was at her most fragile. She hadn't expected a stranger to change everything with just a few words. As the door clicked softly behind the woman, Zoe looked back at her mom, her hand still resting gently in hers. She could feel the love, the strength that had always existed between them, and for the first time, Zoe realized that was enough. She didn't need to fix everything. She just needed to be there. "I love you, Mom," she whispered once more as the room seemed to settle into a deep, peaceful quiet. And this time she was no longer afraid. The waiting was just a part of the process, and she could do it with love and patience. Her mom would wake up. And when she did, Zoe would be there right by her side. "You said